How come United can't spend any money in January? Why do we have to sell players before we can buy players? United makes a lot of money, over £600 million in revenue just last season. Surely we should be able to spend a bit of that on transfers, can't we? What about Ineos? Sir Jim Ratcliffe just invested over $300 million into this football club over the past 6 to 12 months. We can spend a bit of that on transfers, can't we? And what is FFP and this PSR nonsense? You know what? I'm here to explain all this in this video. But before then, pause, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and join us on this channel to discuss United and everything football. We'll be right back. It is important to know what is FFP and PSR. FFP is the old terminology, established somewhere around 2011-2012, Financial Fair Play Rules. It's been replaced by what is now known as PSR, Profit and Sustainability Regulations, which is intended to prevent clubs from spending their way to the top of the Premier League table and to promote sustainable financial decisions. Right? It's just as simple as that. So, for example, you don't want nations to take over football clubs like how Newcastle have been taken over by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which is worth over £320 billion, completely dwarfs every other ownership in the Premier League, just spending their way to the very top. Without these rules, without these regulations, they could spend as much as they want on any player, on anything at all, literally just buy their way to success. To be able to promote some sort of fairness amongst all football clubs, amongst all leagues, amongst all competitions, that is the reason why these rules were actually brought up. But not just that. It's literally to save clubs from themselves as well. There are a lot of clubs that have just overspent what they are capable of spending. Typical examples: Everton and Nottingham Forest last season were trying to spend their way to staying in the Premier League. But in doing so, what you do is you spend beyond your means. You know, for every other big business, that is not out of the norm to run at a debt. Manchester United, like I said in my introduction, is running at a debt. Over £600 million debt in operational cost alone, over £400 million in amortization fees, transfer fees. You're talking about over £1 billion in debt. Real Madrid runs in debt. They've just built a new stadium. Barcelona, well documented, running at a debt. It's not out of place. But what Financial Fair Play does is, it doesn't want you to do that at the expense of the rest of the competition. So it allows a period of time of which you can spend a certain limited amount of money, of which I'm going to get right into it. So what do these rules actually imply? Let me try and make it as simple as possible by running you through some numbers, right? These rules allow you to be able to spend 70% of your revenue on your squad, not just your squad, but in terms of their transfer fees, in terms of their wages, in terms of coaches' salaries, in terms of agents' fees, but it does not include money that you spend on infrastructure, money that you spend on your academy, money that you spend on your women's team. These points are very, very important, but I'm going to come back to them in a bit. But it covers a period of time, right? There's a leeway. Over a 3-year period, clubs are allowed to exceed this value, 70% of their revenue, by £105 million. You know, owing to everything that happened in COVID, all those other losses that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, UEFA, the Premier League, have come up with a little bit of leeway for clubs who would need to go over the top a little bit to be able to continue to operate. £105 million over a 3-year period. Now, let's just run through the actual numbers to get a clear understanding of Manchester United's predicament. when it comes to whether we can spend any money or not. As you can see on the screen, on this pie chart, you can see Manchester United's revenue for season 2023-2024. We made record revenues of £662 million, and this comprises of matchday revenue of over £137 million, commercial revenue of £303 million, and broadcast revenue, that's Premier League TV money, as well as Champions League TV money, which is around £15 million. In total, £222 million. That seems a lot of money, right? But when you do run the numbers of how much Manchester United can actually spend on its squad, 70% of this brings this down to £434 million, right? Manchester United can spend £434 million on players, on their wages, on agents' fees, on coaches' salaries, and so on. And when you do run Manchester United's numbers deeply, you would realize that player wages as of this season is around almost £200 million. To be exact, it's £190 million. We spent almost £200 million on transfer fees. We've spent £34 million on agent fees, as well as £10 million on Erik ten Hag and his coaching staff. You bring all that together, that's a grand total of £434 million. £434 million on just these. If you do the math, you do the deduction, you realize that United just made an operational profit of £25 billion if you deduct from the 70%, £463 million that we can actually spend on these things. But guess what? Even that £25 million has been absorbed in the form of taxes, meaning that Manchester United just went net zero. But then you'll be saying to yourself, if we are currently net zero, then we should be fine, because we have a leeway of £105 million of which we can actually maneuver. But guess what? We are already at that threshold at this football club because of events that had taken place even before Ineos walked through the door. I'm talking about over the past 2 seasons. If you would have realized, we have not been able to spend any money in our last 2 or 3 January transfer windows. The best we've been able to afford is loans. It's because Manchester United has exhausted the threshold. Over the £105 million leeway, we have actually exhausted it. This is owing to the fact that we haven't performed well on a football pitch, of which we have lost revenue, and we haven't sold well. What Ineos have come in and done is tried to fix that aspect of us, of trying to sell well. But then that doesn't offset the debt that has been accrued before. So how does Manchester United go about maneuvering such a... You think it will be that easy, right? But our problems don't even end there. That's just the beginning of our problems. Remember that fancy word I talked about, amortization, at the start of the video? Manchester United owes people. We owe a lot of people. People owe us far less. United owes transfer fees of over £400 million. Remember this Anthony transfer fee of £85 million, Sancho £72 million, Casemiro £60 million, and so on and so on. What amortization means is basically we can spread these transfer fees over a period of time. So if we did buy Anthony 3 years ago, we did buy Casemiro 3 years ago, we did buy Sancho, was it 4 years ago or 5 years ago from Dortmund? I can't even tell. We haven't finished paying the money we owe for these players. But guess what? Come this summer, this very year, we are supposed to pay clubs to the tune of £200 million from the £400 million that we owe. So if we're already at the threshold of £105 million when it comes to the rules, what's the financial fair play rule? Profit and sustainability regulation rules allows it. Imagine going £200 million even further beyond that. Where does that put the club? What it means is that your club has to bring in revenue some way, somehow, or continue to reduce cost. In talking about continue to reduce cost, you've seen all the cost-cutting measures that is happening, right? This is the reason why we have to reduce cost. Not just that, but you have to reduce cost because there's even anticipation of the loss of further revenue. Manchester United, in every likelihood, is not going to play Champions League football next season unless we win the Europa League, right? When we don't qualify for the Champions League, what it means is Manchester United loses revenue from Adidas. Manchester United loses more revenue from TV money. The TV money I spoke of earlier, it's often £15 million from UEFA for just qualifying from the group stages of the Champions League. United can't go back-to-back seasons losing out on over £30 million of UCL, at least group stage money. You can even earn more in other stages of the competition. But that's just even a far-fetch at this very moment, when United is even struggling to qualify for the competition in the first place. Adidas signed a £900 million deal with Manchester United to pay us £90 million every year. But what happens is that with every year you do miss out to the Champions League, you lose out of 25% of that revenue. That amounts to, let's say, £22.5 million every season, coupled with losing Champions League money of at least £15 million every season. We're talking about the club losing £37 million to £40 million every season by just missing out on Champions League football. That's just how dire the situation is. United is reducing costs not just by getting rid of staff, not just by getting rid of Sir Alex Ferguson, but even the players don't earn as much as people think that they earn. You always hear Casemiro is earning £350,000. Marcus Rashford is earning £300,000. But you know what? In every season that this club does not qualify for the Champions League, these players do not earn anything close to that. They lose out of 25% of their wages as well. So for example, if Marcus Rashford is to be earning £300,000 a week, this season he's earning £225,000 a week. Right? If Casemiro is supposed to be earning, let's say, £350,000 a week, he's probably earning £280,000 a week this season as our highest earner at the football club. So everybody's losing money. Players are losing money. Staff are losing money in their jobs. Season ticket prices have to be increased. A lot of things that Ineos are doing, which are not palatable to fans, have to actually be done because the future doesn't look good. Things don't look good. Things don't look good at all. But you get this question from fans that Sir Jim Ratcliffe pumped in $300 million of his own money into the football club and should be able to help, at least, in bringing in players. But like I said before, the profit and sustainability rules does not include money that you would spend on infrastructure, money that you spend on your academy, money that you spend on the women's team, and so on. And that's what this money is actually allocated to. When the Glazers did agree that they needed strategic investments to come into the football club, they didn't directly imply a sale. They have never been interested in selling Manchester United. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos did want to buy Manchester United. But when they did realize that the Glazers were not bent on selling Manchester United, they still wanted a stake in Manchester United. They were able to buy 25% of Manchester United at the cost of just over £1 billion, right? But the agreement with the Glazers at the time was to put money into the football club that the Glazers themselves were never ever going to be willing to put into the football club. Assuming Sir Jim Ratcliffe did not bring his $300 million into the football club, of which £50 million has been allocated to building a new currency, the new training ground. A bit of the money has also been allocated into upgrading Old Trafford. Have you seen the Old Trafford tunnel? Besides the tunnel, there are other places around Old Trafford that have been upgraded. Have you seen all those new flashy academy signings you've been seeing lately, from Chido Obi Martins to Kone to all those other players? We've upgraded the playing staff when it comes to our academy. We've also signed quite a few players when it comes to our female team as well. All this money does not actually factor into the profit and sustainability rules, as I've already said earlier. You cannot spend this money on the squad. You can't spend this money on transfers. You cannot spend this money on player wages. It's exempt from that. The club has to find its own way of taking care of that problem But the money that the Glazers agreed with Ineos to spend on the football club, it's money that it's been spent on these other areas that I've mentioned. And for every amount of money that Ineos invest into this football club, it's ultimately converted into shares. It's not free money. What I mean by this is, I did say Ineos have bought 25% of the club, right? But that $300 million extra investment pushes Sir Jim Ratcliffe's shares at the club from 25% to 29%, meaning he continues to increase his stake at the football club. If the Glazers wanted to sell or are interested in selling, all that they would ask Sir Jim Ratcliffe to do is to put more of his money into the football club, and that money will be converted into shares. And what it means is that Sir Jim Ratcliffe will be increasing his stake at the football club gradually. But they're not willing to do that. And from the Ineos Sir Jim Ratcliffe point of view, would you just be willing to give the club free money that does not actually increase your stake at the football club? The obvious answer is going to be no, right? He's not looking to take money out of Manchester United, as many people know, because since he came into the club, dividends are no longer paid to the Glazers. Dividends are certainly not paid to him or to Ineos. But all he wants to see is his club, as he always says, get back to its glory days. But with all these financial changes, all these explanations that I've given, it's certainly not going to be an easy ride. It's going to take a lot of hard decisions that, of course, are not palatable to everybody at the football club. But then hard decisions have to be made. Just have to be made. Aside cutting costs, the only other way that we can actually make up for all these mistakes and all these losses is to bring money into the football club. And that brings about this other term known as for profit. We've been making a lot of rounds over the past few days. We've been hearing about the likes of Kobe Mainoo, Alejandro Garnacho, Marcus Rashford being on the chopping block, and fans are throwing their hands up in despair. But what for profit simply means is, for every single homegrown player that you sell at a football club, when you do selling, it represents full profit on the books. Just as I explained earlier of players you may bring in whose wages, or players you may even sign from other leagues or probably from other clubs, even in the same league, whose transfer fees are spread over a period of time. With academy players, for every homegrown player that you sell, it represents full profit in that financial year. For example, if you sell Garnacho for £50 million, it represents full profit this year on the books. Whereas if you buy, let's say, a Colomwani for £50 million over a 5-year contract, it represents probably £10 million on the books, as against Garnacho's £50 million. That's still a profit of £40 million the club makes, allowing you to be able to sign more players. If you understand what I mean, you could sign probably 3 or 4 or 5 players for the sale of just one Garnacho. That's basically how full profit actually works. So, like you've seen, United is stocking up its academy. It's stocking up the academy not just to create a pathway for the likes of the Chidi Obi Martins into the first team, but as you've seen with clubs like Chelsea, clubs like Manchester City, ask yourself, how come they've never really gotten into such financial problems despite all their heavy spending? City are about to spend 150 million euros in January. How is that possible? It's because over a period of time, they've been adhering to these rules by bending the rules somehow. What do I mean by this? They have been stocking up the academy and selling players for silly money. Players who probably have never worn a first team jersey for Chelsea or City, going for £25 million, £30 million, £40 million, and whatnot. They have spent the past decade accruing the best talent in the country, the best talent in Europe, and selling them for silly money. Ineos are trying to address that by competing for some of the best young talent once again. We are improving currency for them to know, the parents of these players to know, agents of these players to know that we are a world-class academy again, as we used to be. And this is the place for the best players in the world to be. Not just for the sake of the first team, like I said, but for the sake of the rules. We need to be able to sell these players for a good amount of money so that Manchester United would be able to get out of this problem and not go back into this problem again. It might sound like a lot to decipher, but I hope this video is somehow helpful to be able to answer all these questions, to be able to get to terms as to why Manchester United cannot do what Manchester United should do. You know what? You need to catch up with us in our review of tomorrow's FA Cup game. We'll probably shed a bit more light on this. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comment section and we'll definitely answer them for you. If we can't do so in the comment section, we'll definitely do so in the recorded episode. See you in the next video.